My name is Emily Smith, and I am the most upright and incorruptible court historian of our time. My family has served as historians for generations, leaving behind countless timeless texts for the royal family, with wise rulers and loyal ministers living in harmony. However, when it was my turn to inherit the position, the royal family ended up with a rather inept young emperor. Alexander Johnson, barely of age, possessed an exceptionally handsome face but an utterly unreasonable temper. Alexander and I were naturally at odds, finding each other insufferable. He constantly wanted to have my head because I held all his embarrassing secrets.
From minor incidents like him skipping morning court due to an upset stomach, but lying that he fainted from reviewing documents all night, to major scandals like him spending a night with 5 concubines, each for less than 2 minutes, which I recorded as his inability to perform.
When I documented his inability for the 3rd time, Alexander finally lost his temper.
Take her away and execute her.
After cursing him as a foolish ruler 800 times, I was dragged away. On the night before the execution, something inexplicable happened. Alexander and I swapped bodies. I became the emperor, a man.
What about the real emperor? Terrified, I rushed towards the prison. The guard outside stopped me.
Your Majesty, you cannot enter. Emily Smith went mad early this morning and offended your name. We are disciplining her.
My scalp tingled at the word disciplining. That was my body in there. When I entered, my own body was lying face down on the ground, the face beaten to a pulp.
I will have your entire families executed.
This was just the beginning of the chaos that would unfold from this unexpected twist of fate. Emily Smith woke up. No, it was Alexander Johnson who woke up.
Emily Smith, what have you done to me?
I have no idea what's going on either.
I will destroy your entire Smith family and hang your head on the city wall for 3 days and nights.
The more I listened, the angrier I got. I simply sneered at him.
Get it straight, I am the emperor now. I can send you back to the dungeon right this moment.
Alexander Johnson fell silent.
Besides, why would I want your weak body?
How dare you?
Impudent.
We exchanged sharp words for a long time, finally deciding to call a truce.
I would act as the emperor, and you would be my historian, keeping up the pretense until we return to normal.
Foolish emperor, I warn you, don't try anything with my body.
Alexander Johnson looked at me with a greasy smile on my face. How could he smile so sleazily with my face? Suddenly, he grabbed his own chest and said softly,
Like this.
I turned around, opened the door, and took a sword from a guard, pointing it at my own groin.
Today, I will act on behalf of heaven and remove this useless evil root.
Not only the guard was shocked, but Alexander Johnson's face also changed dramatically. He lunged at me like a mad dog, aiming directly at my unmentionable area. At that moment, Elizabeth Wilson and Catherine Brown happened to come to see me and witnessed the whole scene.
Elizabeth Wilson almost fainted from fright, and Catherine Brown scolded, saying it was outrageous. What a disaster! It took a lot of effort to prevent Catherine Brown from having Alexander Johnson executed. After all, he was her own son. However, all sorts of rebellious and shameless words had already been thrown at Alexander Johnson.
From then on, I took Alexander Johnson's place in court, while he recorded my daily activities and words.
The Smith family motto is to love whatever you do and do it well. So if I were to be the emperor, I would govern diligently.
I woke up earlier than the roosters and was the first to arrive at the court, shocking the ministers.
I wanted to outwork these procrastinating ministers with absolute enthusiasm. Only by starting with the emperor could the country improve. Make sure to record my every word and action.
Alexander Johnson yawned and rolled his eyes at me. I said many golden words about governing the country in court. After the court session, I asked Alexander Johnson for his notebook to see.
Let me see the notes.
You didn't give it to me when I asked before. This is the historian's dignity.
I felt something was off and eventually used the guard's strength to snatch it away. Sure enough, he hadn't written anything. Instead, he had drawn a big turtle sitting on the dragon throne in my record book. He even wrote a note. Not listening, the turtle is chanting.
I took a deep breath and dragged him into a small dark room, giving him a good beating. It didn't matter if it hurt my own body, but Alexander Johnson had to experience physical suffering. That record book was something I cherished dearly.
The life of an emperor is filled with perks and privileges, but it also comes with its own set of challenges.
Apart from the early morning court sessions, the only slightly tiring task is reviewing the memorials.
During these brief moments, countless concubines sent gifts through the eunuchs. Items like lychee honey, premium spring tea, pearl cakes, and handmade wontons.
Your Majesty, please enjoy this lychee honey. I made you some premium spring tea, Your Majesty.
Some concubines even come in to massage the emperor's shoulders and legs, gossip about others, and suggest selecting new ones.
Your Majesty, how about a shoulder massage? Did you hear about Lady Eleanor? She's been quite bold lately.
No wonder everyone wants to be an emperor. Alexander Johnson stood by, watching me with a sidelong glance. After the concubines left, he reclined luxuriously and began to order me around.
Bring me the pearl cakes. Sophia Turner's culinary skills are excellent.
Don't eat those wontons. Olivia Taylor's wontons are particularly bad. I never have the heart to tell her.
I took a bite of the wontons. Not bad at all, colorful, fragrant, and delicious. How picky could this foolish emperor be?
Whoever's food you eat, you must spend the night with them.
What kind of rule is that?
It's a secret palace rule.
I started to tremble.
How many things did I just eat?
You ate everything.
Suddenly, I remembered something from the past.
What about the time you summoned 5 concubines?
That time, I was so hungry while reviewing the memorials that I ate a bit too much. And you recorded that I was incapacitated.
This.
Alexander Johnson walked up to me, patted my shoulder, and said with a strange smile.
Tonight, it's your turn.
I widened my eyes and instinctively covered my lower back.
The eunuch handed me the selection board, and I chose the card of the most arrogant and domineering concubine in the palace, Isabella Thompson. Isabella was notorious for her temper. If the emperor stayed overnight in her chambers, she would confront any other concubine who feigned illness to summon the emperor away, often with a slap and a harsh hypocrite.
You're bold to choose Isabella. This time, I'll make sure to record the emperor's majestic presence.
I gave him a complicated look.
I'm really afraid I'll embarrass myself completely.
Before I could finish, the emperor shoved me into Isabella's chambers.
Your Majesty.
She rushed to my side, her tone overly sweet. She hooked her hand around my belt, pulling me forward. As Isabella began to undress me, her maid suddenly stepped forward and whispered something in her ear. Isabella paused, pondered for a moment, and decisively put her clothes back on.
What's going on?
Your Majesty, my maid saw Victoria Anderson's maid bringing an outsider into the palace. We should check it out.
Isabella's face was full of sincerity, but her eyes gleamed with glee.
It's not that I want a medal, but if the noble consort is meeting outsiders, the palace's atmosphere will be unimaginable in the future.
Ridiculous, the palace intrigue has begun?
Prepare the carriage, let's go to Victoria Anderson's palace. No one is allowed to notify her in advance.
As I pushed the door open, Alexander Johnson was enthusiastically scribbling in my record book. He saw me come out and was stunned.
Finished already?
Seeing that I didn't respond, he became angry and embarrassed.
You're deliberately ruining my reputation.
Shut up!
I snatched the record book from him. It was filled with self-praise.
Stop writing such unbelievable nonsense in my book.
I threw it back at his face. I quickly arrived at Victoria Anderson's quarters, eager to uncover the mystery.
Well, Victoria Anderson, you have been fraternizing with outsiders, causing chaos in the palace. This is unforgivable.
As soon as she finished her rehearsed lines, she suddenly fell silent. When I walked in, I saw that there were only 2 people in Victoria Anderson's chamber. My usually delicate and helpless Elizabeth Wilson was sitting on Victoria Anderson's bed, while the usually enchanting Victoria Anderson, with her shoulders exposed, was leaning over Elizabeth Wilson with a serious expression. Elizabeth Wilson had tears in her eyes and looked at me pitifully. Isabella Thompson stood dumbfounded, lost in thoughts of who am I? Where am I? Wasn't Victoria Anderson supposed to be meeting a man? Why has the man turned into the Empress? Is the harem always this lively? Following behind me, Alexander Johnson's expression remained indifferent. True to her straightforward nature, Victoria Anderson knelt on the ground and explained.
The palace has been unsettled recently, with reports of black-clad intruders. I invited Elizabeth to reminisce but feared being discovered by these intruders. So I had her wear a black cloak to my quarters.
I remained silent. Firstly, why did Elizabeth come to Victoria Anderson's quarters instead of the other way around? Secondly, what was that earlier gesture about?
The Empress and I are like sisters, just playing around.
Elizabeth continued to sob on the bed, looking as if she had been wronged. In the end, the matter concluded with Isabella Thompson metaphorically shooting herself in the foot, tearfully blaming the maidservants and apologizing to everyone. I no longer had to share a bed with Isabella and leisurely rode back in my sedan chair. On the way back, I pointedly asked Alexander Johnson.
Alexander, do you think there's trouble brewing in my harem?
Do you think what you see is the whole truth? Perhaps the truth is the opposite of what you see.
I truly didn't understand. As we continued our daily lives, we sought ways to restore our bodies. We consulted many experts, and eventually, I invited someone from the royal astronomer to provide answers.
There was indeed a rare astronomical phenomenon that night, a 7-star alignment around the moon. This phenomenon might occur again soon. I'll calculate the timing and report back to you.
Soon, it was time for the annual flower viewing banquet at the palace. This traditional festival, started by the first emperor, was the highlight of the year.
Everything is meticulously arranged for the banquet. Ministers and royal relatives will drink and enjoy the flowers together.
For young noblewomen, it's a great opportunity to make an appearance and find a suitable husband. However, Alexander Johnson had different plans for me.
At the banquet, get close to General William's legitimate daughter, Grace Williams. Show her a lot of affection in front of everyone.
I couldn't understand why. Grace Williams was Alexander Johnson's cherished one, intended to be his consort. Why did I have to show affection on his behalf? The day of the banquet arrived quickly.
My gentle Empress, Elizabeth Wilson, had arranged everything meticulously. Victoria Anderson, however, kept staring at Elizabeth Wilson.
Elizabeth, we need to talk.
She pulled Elizabeth Wilson into a corner. Elizabeth's eyes were red again. I pretended not to see, lamenting the decline of morals and the fickleness of human nature. I also saw Alexander Johnson's cherished one, Grace Williams. Among the beautifully dressed noblewomen, her status was higher due to her father being a powerful general.
I admired her brother, James Williams, a handsome and elegant man, my childhood friend. Compared to the sister, the brother is indeed more charming.
Gives a look from a distance.
I walked towards Grace Williams. All eyes were on us. Unexpectedly, Grace Williams blushed as soon as she saw me.
It's an honor to see you here.
Could this be the start of something I hadn't anticipated? The conversation with Grace Williams flowed smoothly, revealing her uncharacteristic shyness around the emperor. A chorus of women's voices suddenly rose from the crowd. To my astonishment, it was James Williams.
James, in a moon-white robe, his face as striking as a painting, had just won first place in the archery competition. His presence always captivated the women.
He truly has features like a painting, I murmured, unable to take my eyes off him.
How can my brother compare to His Majesty? The Emperor is the most handsome man in the court.
Grace's face turned red again. Grace, when did you lose your sight? I asked in disbelief. James walked towards Alexander Johnson, who wore a stern expression. As James leaned in to speak, Alexander gave a cold smile and turned away, leaving James in an awkward position.
Ignoring Grace, I told her to meet me later at the Rainflower Pavilion. I hurried after Alexander, grabbing him anxiously. What did James say to you?
Why are you so anxious about what he said?
Of course I'm anxious, it's James Williams.
I am the Emperor. How am I inferior to James Williams? He's just the son of a general, yet you never show me the same concern you show him.
You foolish emperor, how dare you say that? I spend all day recording your deeds, and you say I'm not concerned? You're tarnishing the honor of my family. Alexander looked at me for a moment, then murmured.
He said he really liked the sword tassel you gave him last time and that he has prepared a return gift for you. He wondered when you would have time to receive it.
My heart leapt into my throat, and what did you say?
Alexander Johnson gave a mischievous smile and said,
I told you that sword tassel is worth just a few coins and can be found everywhere. No need to return the favor, and by the way, I don't have time.
With a dark expression, I pointed to the pond in front of us and said,
You little tyrant, today one of us isn't leaving here alive.
Alexander Johnson looked at me with some displeasure and asked,
That sword tassel, did you really make it yourself?
Of course.
He doesn't deserve you. Stop liking him. Choose someone else, and I can even arrange a marriage for you.
Anger surged within me, and I pushed the little tyrant into the river, shouting,
Help! Someone's fallen into the water.
You! How dare you! Ungrateful!
I clapped my hands, unwilling to argue with the little tyrant any further. I needed to quickly explain things to James Williams. My once-in-a-lifetime romance couldn't be ruined by the little tyrant. I didn't notice the lonely look in Alexander Johnson's eyes as I turned away. When James Williams saw me, he respectfully bowed and said,
Greetings, Your Majesty.
I grabbed his wrist and said,
Let's talk somewhere else.
The people around us were startled by my actions. I pulled James Williams to a secluded spot, and he hurriedly knelt down, saying,
I don't know what I did wrong to disturb your majesty.
Stammering, I said,
I'm here to pass on a message from Emily Smith. What she said earlier wasn't what she meant.
James Williams' face changed dramatically.
Your majesty knows about it too?
Of course I know. That's why I'm here to find you.
I tried to pull him up, but he looked at me in shock, his ears turning so red they could drip blood. He murmured,
Your majesty, could it be that you also?
I nodded. I was indeed here to pass on a message for myself.
Emily Smith said she is willing. If possible, I can join you as well.
I was so clever. With me around, the little tyrant wouldn't be able to cause any trouble during the date.
James Williams' handsome face twisted, and beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. He knelt down again with a thud.
Thank you for your majesty's kindness, but I cannot accept it. I must respectfully decline.
What was going on? Before I could react, James Williams loudly declared,
I did indeed admire your majesty for a long time, not knowing that your majesty also had such inclinations. However, it is too late. I have already pledged my life to the son of Minister Pei, and we wish to be together forever. In the next life, I will continue my bond with your majesty.
What? James Williams is.
So, Alexander Johnson lied to me? Was James Williams actually trying to gently refuse me?
As I was processing this overwhelming information, I suddenly saw James Williams' expression change. He called out behind me,
Sister.
I turned around and saw Grace Williams standing not far away. She had heard our entire conversation. Covering her mouth in disbelief, she quickly ran off.
I had no mind to care about her. I was completely immersed in the pain of realizing that the man I liked had different preferences. The most important thing was that this man had once secretly admired Alexander Johnson. Even Alexander Johnson's charm surpassed mine.
Well, his mother did give him an exceptionally attractive appearance, so he indeed had more charm than I did. But I was still very hurt. Soon, the news that I also had different preferences spread throughout the entire palace. It made Alexander Johnson furious. He came to have a big argument with me.
I had originally made up a lie to spare your feelings, but you not only pushed me into the water but also made everyone think I had different preferences.
What does this have to do with Catherine Brown?
We parted on bad terms and entered a complete Cold War. I also gave him a break, telling him not to show up in front of me. I was heartbroken for several days.
One day, Sophia Turner invited me to her palace for a little chat. She had specially brewed some plum wine for me. Plum wine, the sentiment of childhood friends, ultimately couldn't compare to the fact that he had different preferences, sob sob.
I wanted to drown my sorrows in alcohol, so I went to Sophia Turner's palace. She was overjoyed to see me and clung to me. I just kept drinking cup after cup, not listening to anything she said. I felt like crying. Is this what heartbreak feels like?
As I was drinking, suddenly Emily Smith, no, Alexander Johnson, rushed in, catching Sophia Turner off guard with a swift chop to the neck, and then shouted,
Don't drink that!
Sophia Turner fainted, and I looked at Alexander Johnson in confusion.
How can you drink anything anyone gives you? Sophia Turner is known for drugging people.
Even without Alexander Johnson saying anything, I already sensed something was wrong. I stood up and felt dizzy, my entire body unbearably hot.
What kind of potion did she use? Is it going to harm me? Quickly, summon the royal physician.
She's just a concubine, always scheming for favor. What kind of potion do you think she would use?
The heat increased, and even Alexander Johnson seemed to have a pinkish hue. Seeing my condition worsen, he quickly had a bowl of cold water poured over my head.
It's not working. The heat, it's only getting worse.
Stop looking at me like that.
He pointed to the unconscious Sophia Turner.
Otherwise, I'll leave, and you can attend to her.
I wasn't thinking clearly. I grabbed Alexander Johnson's hand and kissed his lips.
It's my own body. Help.
Rationality was lost. I felt like a fish in boiling water, struggling desperately. The next day, I woke up in silence. Alexander Johnson was curled up in the corner of the bed, silently crying.
Stop crying. I'll take responsibility.
I can't believe I was, by myself. You.
He had his own pain too.
Look at it this way. At least I proved that you are capable of, not only capable but...
His eyes could kill.
Get out!
And I think it wasn't bad. What do you think?
I think your skills are terrible.
Since then, my relationship with Alexander Johnson had undergone a significant change. Both of us were quite dissatisfied with the situation, but it felt odd to blame anyone else, so we directed our frustration towards Sophia Turner.
I can't believe Sophia betrayed us like that.
Sophia Turner was demoted to a commoner and expelled from the palace, never to return. Alexander Johnson no longer acted arrogantly, and the atmosphere between us became awkward. Sometimes, when our hands accidentally touched while looking at records, we would blush to an embarrassing degree.
I need to tell you something.
But he never did. One day, Catherine Brown summoned me for a conversation. Catherine Brown was an extremely beautiful woman, and despite her age, she still retained her charm. However, she was not Alexander Johnson's biological mother but his adoptive one.
Be cautious with your words. She can be quite formidable.
I replied that I understood. After all, she was the reigning champion of palace intrigues, a formidable character.
I haven't seen the Emperor for a long time, but I've heard quite a few rumors lately.
I forced a smile and replied.
They're just idle gossip, Mother. You needn't pay them any mind.
Let's talk about something serious. The son of the left minister has requested to marry General Williams' daughter, Grace Williams. I think they are a perfect match, both in talent and appearance, so I have agreed to the marriage.
I thought to myself that this was not good. Grace Williams was the woman Alexander Johnson liked, and he was very fond of her. I couldn't easily agree to this.
Mother, while your intentions are kind, I don't think it's appropriate. The son of the left minister has had numerous concubines and even kept a courtesan as his mistress. This mistress once fought with a maid for his favor and ended up beating the maid to death. With such conduct, how could he be worthy of General Williams' daughter?
You know about this?
I smiled. My family has always been well informed. Catherine Brown sent someone to investigate, and if it turned out to be true, the matter would be called off. I was just thinking about how Alexander Johnson might repay me when Catherine Brown added.
I've heard that the Emperor has been quite close to Emily Smith from the Shin family recently.
I was taken aback, and Catherine Brown smiled.
If he likes her, he should take her as a concubine. This would not only quell the rumor.
I came out. Since then, I have never attended to the Emperor's bedchamber again. Alexander Johnson always found various excuses to shield me from it. Everyone became even more convinced that the Emperor had a peculiar preference. I sighed. Aren't you afraid of what people might say about you?
Don't you think it would make you look like a heartless man if you kept attending to me after what you did?
Indeed, when a man is put in a woman's position, he becomes like a woman. So what should we do? To dispel the rumors, should you attend to me one more time?
Don't even think about it.
It was my first time being a man without experience, but he didn't have to be so resistant. Recently, the palace has not been peaceful. The barbarian nation at the border has been gathering supplies. Although all indicators pointed to them preparing to attack a small country, Alexander Johnson became very serious upon hearing the news, his brows furrowed with worry. He was definitely hiding something from me. Unable to bear my repeated pleas, he finally sighed and asked me to keep my evening free, saying he would take me to meet some people. That evening, I arrived at the designated place in disguise. I waited for a long time, but he never showed up. Just as I was about to leave, a commotion erupted from the direction of the sleeping quarters.
Assassins! Catch the assassins!
Assassins? In my palace? I was at a loss when suddenly a shadowy figure approached from afar. The person was dressed in black, with captivating eyes. As our eyes met, the figure swiftly drew a blade and swung it at me. Could I be any more unlucky? Just escaped an assassination attempt in the sleeping quarters, and now I run into another assailant? I dodged quickly, and in that instant, I managed to pull off the person's mask. The face that appeared was innocent and harmless, but after a moment of panic, it smiled at me. It was none other than my seemingly delicate and helpless Elizabeth Wilson. The tension in the air was palpable as the confrontation began.
Why are you pretending, Your Majesty? Haven't you known my true identity all along? I just dealt with your beloved, and here you are, running into me.
She wore the most innocent expression while uttering the harshest words.
Who do you mean by beloved?
Emily Smith, of course. Did I harm the wrong person?
My heart sank instantly.
You harmed Emily Smith?
Elizabeth licked the blood off her dagger with a gleam of satisfaction in her eyes.
I originally intended to capture her for Catherine Brown, but things took an unexpected turn. She preferred to die rather than submit and even recognized who I was. I couldn't let her live.
The realization struck me hard. Elizabeth was actually working for Catherine Brown. I had always known Catherine was ruthless, but I never imagined she would go to such extremes.
Of course, I must take your life as well. That way, I will be free.
With that, Elizabeth lunged at me. I was a scholar, naturally lacking any combat skills. However, Alexander Johnson's body had strength. Though I couldn't defeat her, I could at least resist. I dodged behind a tree, avoiding a fatal blow, but Elizabeth's dagger quickly came at me again.
Just when I thought my life was over, a bloodied woman wielding a long sword rushed in front of me, blocking the attack.
Run, now!
It was Alexander Johnson. He wasn't dead. Seeing him, I almost burst into tears.
How is this possible? Weren't you dead?
Next time you harm someone, make sure to cut their throat. This is my cherished body. How could you think you could kill me?
Elizabeth regained her usual composure and smiled.
No matter. I'll just harm you again and send you to meet the Emperor in the afterlife.
Alexander struggled to fend off Elizabeth's attacks. Suddenly, he seemed to notice something, a slight smile forming at the corner of his mouth.
Why aren't you acting?
What?
Elizabeth turned around in shock, and in that instant, an arrow pierced through her body. Her eyes dimmed as she saw the person who had shot the arrow.
It really is you.
She slowly collapsed. Only then did I see, standing on a tree not far away, a figure with a graceful posture, holding a bow and arrow, looking at us calmly. It was Victoria Anderson. What on earth was going on? I wanted to ask Alexander for an explanation, but he fainted in my arms from blood loss. Fortunately, the guards arrived just in time. Alexander Johnson's life was spared, or rather, my life was spared. I finally learned the whole truth from his lips.
This harem is actually a shackle for the emperor.
Back when the current Catherine Brown was still a consort, her biological son rebelled and usurped the throne, leading the former emperor to demote her to a commoner, banning her from the palace for life. In desperation, she raised Alexander Johnson and poisoned his biological mother.
Supporting me to ascend the throne was merely a temporary measure for her. Her ultimate plan was to consolidate power and then dethrone me to place her own son on the throne.
Thus, she planted numerous spies around Alexander Johnson, with Elizabeth Wilson being one of them.
I trusted no one, so I always portrayed myself as a frivolous and incompetent ruler, while secretly biding my time and contending with Catherine Brown.
He also placed his own people in the palace, with Victoria Anderson being one of them. Victoria Anderson was a daughter from his maternal family and naturally willing to help him.
The so-called abnormal relationship you witnessed between Victoria Anderson and Elizabeth Wilson was actually a masked game between an assassin and a watcher.
However, Elizabeth Wilson seemed to have fallen into the trap, not realizing that Victoria Anderson would actually end her life.
My pursuit of Grace Williams was merely an attempt to win over General Williams, as those who control military power are the most dangerous.
Unexpectedly, my interference with James Williams ruined this marriage, causing Catherine Brown to lose her reservations and accelerate the palace coup.
So, the recent border disturbances are also related to Catherine Brown?
Catherine Brown has always had connections with foreign tribes. Collaborating from within and without to seize power is nothing to her. She has been planning for many years.
But why would the foreign tribes listen to her?
Naturally, by willingly ceding territory to those outsiders.
I jumped up in anger.
How can she be fit to be the Empress Dowager?
I never wanted to drag you into this. After all, this is my own affair. Unfortunately, it seems I was wrong. They have already set their sights on you.
I grasped his hand.
You should have told me. What would I do if you were gone?
Alexander Johnson was stunned, his face suddenly turning red.
I mean, what would happen to my body? This frail body of mine has already...
Alexander Johnson had his own plans. He led me and Victoria Anderson to a secret chamber in the imperial study to meet the loyal guards he had been training in advance. One of them, right in front of me, waved his sleeve and his face transformed into that of Elizabeth Wilson.
Does it look convincing?
I marveled at the transformation. I marveled, it's almost indistinguishable from the real thing.
Her eyes should be a bit more innocent, but if you don't look closely, it's quite similar.
The Emperor sighed.
The Empress must return to her position. We can't let Catherine Brown notice anything amiss.
I quickly asked, what else do we need?
We need General Williams' support.
He looked at me.
Do you have any ideas?
I certainly did.
Patting my chest, I assured him.
Leave it to me. After all, James Williams and I grew up together, and with the recent scandal about his son's preferences, General Williams just needed some reassurance. I wasn't known as the top gossip in the capital for nothing. Meanwhile, news came from the royal astronomer that the phenomenon of the 7 stars encircling the moon would occur again within the next week.
We should wait until we switch back to our original bodies before taking action.
I asked him, what if we can't switch back? Alexander fell silent and then spoke softly.
I don't dare to think about it.
I was about to mock him for being afraid of anything when he added softly.
If something happened to you, I might regret it for the rest of my life.
I couldn't help but tease him. Come on, you wanted to execute me and my entire family at the beginning. Alexander laughed.
I just wanted to scare you. Who told you to be so fearless, always challenging me, never sparing me a glance except for work? Since childhood, you've called me a foolish emperor and even slandered me as impotent. I thought I'd show you what happens when you offend a foolish emperor.
I sighed. And somehow, we ended up swapping bodies.
Actually, that night, I was thinking about you. During the 7 stars encircling the moon, I saw it.
I was silent for a long time. I wanted to tell him that a prison guard had seen the celestial phenomenon that night, and through the wooden bars, I had also seen the moon. At that moment, I was thinking about Alexander Johnson too. But I was cursing him as a foolish emperor, wondering why he hadn't died sooner. Maybe it was that moment of mutual thought that caused us to switch bodies. But I would never tell him what I was really thinking at that moment. On the day of the Mid-Autumn Palace banquet, Catherine Brown staged a coup with cunning ambition in her eyes.
Capture them all. My son will ascend to the throne tonight.
But her confidence crumbled when General William's loyal soldiers stormed the palace, securing the emperor's safety.
What is this? Impossible. How did you?
She was quickly surrounded, realizing too late that she had been deceived.
Your love for power blinded you, Catherine. My father's loyalty lies with his family, not your ambitions.
Her faction was swiftly eradicated. Just as victory seemed within reach, Catherine revealed a sinister smile.
Fate decides the emperor's destiny, not you. And you lack that destiny.
Suddenly, an assassin disguised as Elizabeth Wilson, sitting beside us, attacked, aiming a long sword straight at me.
A double cross?
In that crucial moment, Alexander Johnson stepped in front of me, gripping the sword with his hand.
Not on my watch.
Blood dripped onto the ground as the attendants captured the treacherous assassin.
Alexander Johnson's chest was slashed open. I looked at him, tears streaming down my face.
No need to worry so much about me.
I couldn't hold back any longer and burst into tears. I had only lent him my body, and now it was in such a state. I didn't want to switch back for the time being. This was practically a workplace injury. I hugged Alexander Johnson tightly. No, my own body. My frail body had endured far too many injuries it shouldn't have. Life had returned to a semblance of normality.
Relieved. After I cleared out all the consorts the Empress Dowager had recommended for Alexander Johnson, the harem was practically empty. How much torment must Alexander have endured daily?
The Empress Dowager was stripped of her title and sentenced according to the law for conspiring with foreign forces to usurp the throne. Alexander avenged his mother in the process. Meanwhile, I was avoiding Alexander. The royal astronomer informed me that tonight was the night of the 7 stars encircling the moon, the best opportunity for us to switch back our bodies.
I laughed to myself. There was no way I was switching back. That wretched emperor had left me with a body full of injuries. He could take his time recovering. I'd be a fool to switch back now.
Alexander finally realized my intentions and started searching the palace for me frantically. I lay comfortably in my chamber as he banged on the door.
Emily Smith, come out! Don't think I don't know you're in there. Switch our bodies back now.
The head eunuch asked me how to handle the situation.
Your orders, Your Majesty?
Obviously, Lord Emily has gone mad. Treat him as a patient and drag him away.
Alexander was dragged away, cursing all the while. Tonight, I was going to sleep soundly. In the middle of the night, I was awakened by a faint noise. I opened my eyes to see someone climbing onto my bed. Just as I was about to scream, my mouth was covered.
It was that wretched Alexander again. He looked at me with a ghostly expression.
Don't scream. No one can save you. Those useless guards can't stop me.
I pried his hand away and angrily confronted him.
What do you want? Don't you dare lay a hand on me.
I should be the one saying that. Tonight, I'm here to take back my body.
Dream on. I'm not switching back to a body full of injuries. I won't miss you at all. Let's see how you plan to switch.
Alexander leaned closer, his eyes captivating even with my face.
First, your injuries aren't healed. I can take care of you. Second, tonight, you will miss me.
Outside, the 7 stars encircled the moon, casting a cold, silvery light through the window.